Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a really special presentation of OTF Connects, and this is the ELL Adaptations and Assessment. And our presenter today has been very involved in this whole initiative, which is pretty groundbreaking and pretty exciting for all of the teachers in your boards, as well as some others who are going to be joining us. Avis is from the Blue Water District. And today we're going to be talking about adaptations and assessment. So I'm going to turn my mic off now and turn things over to Avis. Welcome, Avis.
Thank you so much, Susan. Lovely introduction, and I hope everybody is feeling comfortable with those icons and things and ready to go. So a little tiny introduction of myself. I have been working for 23 years living and working in cultures different to my own, both in Northern Ontario and overseas. And I've taught elementary and secondary in Nigeria, in Zambia, in the Middle East, in the South Pacific, and within Canada I've taught English language learners in Ontario at the University of Ottawa and at Algonquin College. And then I have about 20 years teaching on top of that, working in the Ontario education system as well. And currently I'm the ESL ELD system lead teacher with the Blue Water Board of Education. And with me, right here in the same room today, is Christine, and I'm going to let Christine introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Christine Ignis, and I work at the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board in Barrie. I'm an ESL itinerant/resource teacher, and I've also worked abroad teaching in different countries, and I originally come from elementary, where I taught primary for quite a few years and have been in this role for about 6 years now. So I'm very excited to be part of this project and to share in the learning this afternoon.
So when Christine and I decided that we needed to reach out to the classroom teachers with something, we decided on a webinar, and we pulled in our wonderful colleagues from 3 other boards. So there are 5 boards working on this together, colleagues, and 5 boards participating in it. So I'd like to welcome everybody from so many different areas of Ontario who are with us today and who will be joining us. I know it's tough at the end of the school day, and I know people will join in as time goes along. Just getting used to this myself. What am I doing? Here we go. All right. Christine's going to speak to the next couple of slides.
So as Avis was saying, these webinars it's a series of 5 webinars. This is the 3rd webinar, and we do welcome everyone that's able to join us this afternoon. And the boards are listed there. They're from different parts of the province, Southern Ontario, and the purpose of these webinars was to support teachers that have ELLs, whether they are Canadian-born or newcomers in their classrooms or entering their classrooms maybe for the first time. Specifically, we were concerned about supporting teachers in boards that may not have had the experience of supporting newcomers, especially the Syrian newcomers that have been a recent addition to our country and to our schools across this province. So we're excited to share learning and to learn from each other and to share information about assessments and adaptations for ELLs in classrooms. So this webinar was created for the classroom teacher who has English language learners either from K right up to grade 12 in their classroom or their course. Participants will further develop their understanding of second language learning. We'll share ideas and explore best practices with colleagues from across the province, and we're going to walk away with some practical strategies and resource suggestions to help meet the needs of the ELLs in our classes.
Susan's coming back to join us.
Yep, and just quickly, OTF runs a whole series of webinars throughout the school year. We started in January this year, and they run Monday to Thursday and go right till the end of May. And there's a wonderful selection, real focus on math and technology in this next coming few weeks. So check out that link there. I will put that in the chat if you're interested. And moving on, you can also find out more about OTF if you're a tweeter or on Facebook or on YouTube. Lots of good OTF stuff there. And I'll let Avis and Christine continue.
All right, so in terms of participation and what we're going to do, so I'm really encouraging participation today. I hope that you will all be able to do that. So sometimes I will poll, which we're going to see in the next few slides, just to see what kind of experience we have and what kind of knowledge and understanding that you have around the English language learners topic. And there also are going to be times when we're going to delve into some of the resources that we'll make available for you to access online. And I'll be asking you to read from that sections, and also to make some comments and respond. And sometimes it will be in the chat box, which is on your left, and sometimes it will be on a whiteboard where you're adding text. Now the great thing about the whiteboard is that it offers anonymity. So we don't know who's typing on the whiteboard, and you can be as honest as you need to be at that point in time. In the chat box, we see who you are. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, it's going to sound like I'm a Ministry of Education staffer. I'm not, but I do want to encourage everybody, because what you see in front of you is all Ministry of Education resources, and I actually have found that in the last short time just how useful these resources are. And sometimes you just need to delve into them to see yourself. And at times it's hard to find time to delve into a lot of the resources we have. So we will be looking today at two in particular of these. We'll be looking at the Supporting English Language Learners Grade 1 to 8, and we'll be delving into the Steps to English Proficiency, a guide for users as well. So, but the other ones we make mention of, and the other ones I hope that you'll also be able to find some time to look at. They're equally as good. In particular, the Supporting English Language Learners in Kindergarten is good for kindergarten teachers, and Supporting English Language Learners with limited prior schooling is an excellent resource. But I know that next session on ELDs, Atawa will be addressing that one as well. Now, if I could just ask you to use the symbols available under the clip art and pop yourself in here. So who are you? What are you teaching? If you could just take a symbol and put yourself into the column, and we can see who we've got on board with us today. I just encourage everybody to try that out. This is just a chance for you to have some practice in using those symbols and putting them on.
Can I just ask a quick question? I meant to ask this at the beginning. Are any of you in a room sharing one device with more than one person?
That's a good point, Susan.
One of you, just let us know in the chat if that's the case. So if we don't hear from anyone, we'll assume that you all have your own device. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, and yes, I do. Sorry, Susan, I've just not seen your notice right now. Before we go any farther, there are two links that Susan's going to put up. One is to the STEPS user guide, and one is to the Supporting English. And if you could open both of those and just have them tabbed at the top, so that when we when I ask you to go in and have a read, then you can just easily grab it and open it. So if you could just take a second to open both of those now. And give me a thumbs up when you've got them opened.
the thumbs disappear quickly, just to remind you, so it's hard to catch them. If anyone's having difficulty opening those links, let me know. It should just be a quick click, and it's open. So, let me know if you're having trouble with that. I think you can probably go on, Avis.
Okay, all right. I'm just seeing a few not open, but let's hope that they're able to get them. Okay, in the next slide, if you could just, again, put an icon in the column that fits you best. So your understanding of ESL, if you could use a green check where you fit, no experience through to several years experience. And the same for ELD, if you've got experience or no experience or a little bit in between, put a red X. So if you could just put an icon onto that. Okay, so we've got quite a bit of experience happening, some first time this year, and that's probably people who have new Syrian or Eritrean or Iraqi refugees for the first time, I'm thinking on that one. The next slide, I'm going to ask you one more time to put an icon somewhere where it fits, and this is your knowledge of STEP as the assessment continuum for ESL and ELD. So no knowledge, been introduced but not using it, whatever fits for you. Okay, so it looks like we have quite a few people who have an idea about it, but not yet using it. So hopefully, I know STEP was mentioned in the first two webinars we had, and we'll delve into it a little bit more deeply this time perhaps, and that will help you with that. All right. What I'd like you to do is look at these two quotes. They both come from the Supporting English Language Learners grade 1 to 8. We can have a look at the one on the left and then perhaps the one on the right from Pauline Gibbons. Also, Scaffolding Language, Scaffolding Learning by Pauline Gibbons is a really good book to have on hand. If you get a chance to have something in your professional library, that might be one of them. I'll just let you look at that, and in the chat box, if you could just make some sort of a response to what you see there. What you might want to think about here, and as you look at these two quotes, are implications for the English language learners in your class, and also the implications for teachers. Sorry about that, Michelle. I hope you'll enjoy the recorded session. I think we'll move along, but you're absolutely right. From the comments we've had, it is a challenge, and that's really what we're looking at here with these, that challenge of learning language and learning curriculum at the same time for teachers is a big implication. Right, and Art is suggesting probably what we all notice is that the reading of English doesn't necessarily mean we've got good comprehension and or nor academic language sufficient enough to access the curriculum content areas. And that's really what we'll be looking at, a lot of what we'll be looking at today. Just going to move along. If I could ask you now to use your text box, that's the symbol with the A, and jot something in here. So how do teachers, and this kind of addresses what Art said, how do teachers assist ELLs with varying levels of proficiency to achieve in the content areas? So Art, you led right into this question for us. So if you have some ideas that you've tried, offer them now. If you've got some questions or some wonderings, jot them down now. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, with some really good ideas coming up there. Just to address for a second the one that says find simpler texts about the same content. I'll put a little plug in here for Britannica Schools. I don't know how many people have used that, but if you don't, I suggest you give it a try. I think it's a ministry licensed and therefore free to everybody in Ontario, so your board should have access and a password for that, as all of schools should have. It offers any topic in 3 different levels of reading, and it's excellent. And not only that, there's links into videos and audio clips and wonderful links, so it's a really good one to try.
Davis, was that Britannica School?
Correct. Oh, and somebody's put that up there as well. Good. Anything else you see there, Christine, that we should make a comment on? Some really good ideas.
Yeah, I like the different leveled readers or different texts at different levels. I know you can find published series sometimes that support ELLs in that way, that they have the same text at different levels that they can, schools can purchase. And if you can't purchase something, which is often the challenge in the classroom, it's often quick to either just photocopy the page and highlight the key points on the page with a highlighter for the student to just focus on those key points on the page that the rest of the students are using.
I really like the focus on areas of interest to build confidence and to encourage it. And I'm going to add to that not just areas of interest, but also areas which connect to their previous to their culture or to their previous sort of life. It really helps. I was in a collaborative inquiry with teachers yesterday where that was brought up and identified and exampled, and I'm sure all of you have examples of that. If you help those children connect to something that they understand, it's much, much easier. Dual language texts are really an interesting way to go if possible. I find that not only are we adding to the children's identity and sense of identity, but we're also and valuing their language and their culture, but we're also, I think, assisting with to encourage them to be bilingual, not just monolingual, and the idea that we are not replacing their language with English as they come into Ontario, but hopefully we will end up with, at the end of the day, with bilingual or trilingual, or however many languages they're speaking to students. And I know it's up to their parents to do the literacy component of their first language. Many of our schools don't offer that, but I think parents seeing dual language books coming into their homes from the schools encourages them to do just that and to value the language that they have as their first language. I'm going to move on now. So this webinar is about adaptations and assessment. And I'd like to start with assessment. Needing assessment for, assessment as, and assessment of learning, of course, is something that we all are familiar with, I think, but it's certainly needed for ELLs as well. But for ELLs, it's needed in two areas. It's needed in language proficiency, so assessment of language proficiency, and assessment of content knowledge and the expectations of the Ontario curriculum. And if you think back to the Pauline Gibbons quote, that's really what she was talking about there. So we're now. I just wonder if you could, in your in the chat box, give an idea of when and how often you feel that you should assess students' progress, your ELL's progress. Okay, so we're seeing portfolios being used to show growth over time, so in ongoing assessments. Anything else that you'd like to add there? Appreciate diagnostics at the start. Excellent. So that's assessment for and assessment of. Good point about assessing when they feel they are successful. Okay, and the point of an assessment should be a multimodal is beautiful because it leads us right into the next slide, which is talking about the triangulation of assessment. Now, I find that as I talk about this in the schools, this is a little bit new for some people or a little bit different for some people. I think traditionally we have relied on the product for our assessments, both for and of learning. So the triangulation of assessment is looking at product, but also observation and conversation. So in the next 3 slides, I'm going to ask you to consider your confidence in each of these three, both each of product, observation, and conversation, and your confidence in them as a valid assessment tool, and also what your current usage is. So if you look at this one, what we're going to do is try and plot you. So if you, with this one, if you choose an icon again, and on the vertical axis you've got your current practice. You can imagine where that's going to go, and from or where you're using product only through up to the top where you're using a triangulation of assessment. And then on the horizontal axis, if you can plot where you feel, how confident you are in using product as an assessment tool. In other words, if you think it's if you're very confident in the product as an assessment tool or not. And then plot yourself somewhere inside on this open graph, if that makes sense. So you'll have one mark somewhere within this open graph. So imagine, you're going to go up vertically and go across, and then put yourself somewhere where you think those two lines would meet. So the pin, for instance, over in the right-hand side, that person is feeling quite confident in product as an assessment tool, but they're also feeling that they have a balance in their own practice with using triangulation assessment. Some people are feeling less confident, but in just product, and they use a balance. So we've got people over here using a balance. Okay, I'm just going to move us along to the next slide, see where you can place yourself here. And this is where, with observation, how confident are you in observation as an assessment tool? That's on the horizontal axis. And your current practice with observation and documentation. In your current practice, do you have no observation as part of assessment, or do you have what you feel is sufficient observation as documentation for observation? Just place yourself on there. So it kind of looks like we're seeing people fare anywhere from sort of mid to reasonably confident using observations, but not feeling that perhaps some are feeling they're not getting quite as much documentation as they would like to for this tool. Okay, and I'm going to move us along to the next one as well, which is conversation. And if you can do the same, where the how confident are you in conversation as an assessment tool on the horizontal axis? And in terms of your current practice, no time for that, or you find that you are able to make sufficient time for that. While you're putting yourself on there, I just want to tell a little story here. This is quite recently. I just found that this story came to me. So I'm going to call it One Teacher's Story, and it's about the power of conversation to develop metacognition in a student. So you imagine this teacher was videoing a conversation with a student who was explaining their thinking around the solution to an open-ended math problem. And when the teacher looked back at the video to review it, the teacher realized that she had done much of the talking, taking over from the student when the student started to find it difficult to explain things. And the teacher realized that, first of all, there had not been enough wait time given to this student to think the problem, to think the explanation through. But the teacher also realized that the student did not have enough language, perhaps because there wasn't enough practice around the current context-specific math language to confidently express themselves. So what happened was the teacher then went back to the student and showed the video clip and publicly in the class apologized to the student for jumping in and making assumptions about the student's thinking. Because what happened was at the end of the video clip when the teacher said, "Is that what you were trying to say?" the student, of course, nodded and said, "Yes, that's what I was trying to say," but the student actually had not said it. So what happened following that is quite interesting. The class that this student was in was actually working with, this was a grade 6 student, was actually working with a grade 1 class and on open-ended math problems. And the same student, when working with the grade 1 students, of course now this grade 6 student is quite confident with the material in the grade 1 class, and the student's role then became the role of the teacher. And the student had been given some good modeling around asking questions by the teacher, and that to help their little grade 1 charges to drive the problem solving that was happening, so that the grade 6 students didn't give answers but just drove them into thinking through the problem. So after the session, the student went up to the teacher, the grade 6 student went up to the teacher and said that now he understood how difficult it was to bite one's tongue and not jump in when the younger student was trying to express himself. And I think that's a sort of in terms of assessment as learning and metacognition, it's a nice example of students given ELLs as well being given a chance to think through their thinking and think about where they can go, set goals and so on with their next as they move along. Okay, so I see with the confidence in conversations, conversation is probably something that some people are not quite as able to find time to do, and that's quite understandable, but it is for the ELL students, the triangulation of assessment is a really important one because the product doesn't always get what we want from the student. The thinking through conversation and through observation helps us assess, I feel, in a much better way. Now, so talking about assessment for, assessment as, and assessment of learning, I'll let you take a few seconds to read that slide. At the same time, if you could now go into the supporting ELL's grade 1 to 8 document that hopefully you have open. And if you look at page 61, there's a blue box. I'd appreciate if you could read that and share some of the areas shown there. Share some of the areas that you hope to change or incorporate into your own practice. Some of the things that are stated in that box. And just share that into the chat box, please. I see Jenny says that your student, that student self-assessment doesn't do that enough. I think, Jenny, you're not alone in that. It's something that maybe all of us can work towards. Good point from Christina on the inclusion of parents. So Jenny's asking us to comment on, or to give her some ideas on how to actively involve parents. I'm going to put a little plug in here for Celebrating Linguistic Diversity, which is a conference on in May, May the 5th to the 7th in Toronto. It's sponsored by Toronto District School Board and OISE. And I noticed as I was going through the workshops today to choose mine for that conference, there is a workshop on just that, on involving parents of English language learners more in within the class, I guess, and certainly within their lives of school lives of their children, and within assessment as well. I'm sure that they'll bring into that. So that might be one, Jenny, if you're going to Celebrating Linguistic Diversity in Toronto, might be one you want to catch. Right, the assessment in their first language. A lot of people are doing things like that. Of course, when we do the initial assessment of the child, if the child is literate in their first language, we usually ask for them to write something in their first language, and that tells us a lot about their literacy skills that they're bringing with them. But beyond that, in the classroom, this can be used as well. I don't know if anybody has had experience doing that. As you say, Nancy, if you're working, if your ELLs are low German speaking students, their written language is, they're not confident with that. They don't really have a written language. So, but certainly with other students it does work. Thank you, Atala. Parents should be invited to school to share what they know about their child. It's part of the team, isn't it? Okay, I think I'm going to move this along. So just as an example here, just started to get into these documents, and you can see the wealth of information in the supporting language, supporting ELLs grade 1 to 8 document. From Growing Success, again, another document that maybe we don't access very often, but it has a lot of good information in it. Just have a quick look at this slide, quick read. If you can draw it into the text box, is there anything, into the chat box, if there's anything that stands out on this slide for you? Nice idea, Tala. Story time by the parents in your home language is another way to involve parents. I think one of the things that stands out for me on this slide is the assessment as learning, and this is assessment as learning, requires the student to have a clear understanding of the goals and the success criteria. I have a little example of that again, if you don't mind me sharing. I taught in the United Arab Emirates for the last 4 years, up until 2014. And I was teaching secondary, but I often went down into the elementary to visit with the elementary teachers and students as well. And I was in a grade 2 class with little girls who are all Arabic-speaking girls. And part of their process was taking their work to the whiteboard, usually with a peer to help them, and checking the success criteria, which was printed very simply in very simple language for them. And they would go up and they would check it and they would assess their own learning. For example, I recall one might have been, did they have 3 sentences? Did they have punctuation? Did they have a word from their word bank in each sentence? Those sort of things were part of the success criteria. And they would go up and they would check their work and they would chat about it in their first language, in Arabic, and they would make any changes that they needed before they would take it to the teacher to talk about it. And so I think this was a nice example of students having an understanding of their learning goals and what the success criteria was, and then assessing using their own thinking it through. Of course, for diagnostic, assessing 4 is a diagnostic and trying to identify the gaps and misunderstandings, the areas we're all pretty comfortable in understanding of that. And assessment, obviously assessment of the student and what the student has learned in the content areas according to the expectations of the curriculum. Just have a look at this slide with especially the top paragraph. And this is about ELLs. And just an understanding, of course, we are assessing academic strengths from the Ontario curriculum, and at the same time we're assessing their language or their linguistic growth. At any time, just ask any questions in the chat box if you have some questions to ask around these things as well. We've got a wealth of people in our chat room to help us with answers and solutions. And this assessment for learning is from the learning supporting ELLs again, assessment that informs instruction. And don't forget the bit in red. Our ELLs are wonderful resources in our classroom. I had a teacher last year in the collaborative inquiry come to the realization of that. She said, you know, I always used to think they were a problem, but now I realize they're not a problem, they're a resource. So that was a lovely bit of metacognition in itself. Okay, so as we're talking about assessment, I guess this is the time to start talking about STEP. So the assessment of language and linguistic growth is done in Ontario through something called STEP. And what I'd like us to do, and again, the STEP user guide, the one that's been revised in November of 2015, is an incredible source of many, many things. So we're going to have a look at that in the next few slides. This particular slide is one of the first places I think to go in the STEP user guide, and this is actually from page 9 of the guide if you have your guide open. And if you don't have a copy of the guide, I really strongly suggest that you make one and have it on hand, because there's a lot of useful things you can take from it as through time. This section is looking at the classroom teachers, but it also, in this section around page 9, they're looking at the parents, the students, the ESL teachers, and the system and the school leaders, and so on, and how STEP can be used by each of those groups of people. So if you don't mind at this point in time, if you could go into the STEP user guide, which hopefully you have open at the top, and just go to page 9 and have a quick look at the pages either side of that and see how other groups of people, apart from classroom teachers, might want to make use of STEP. If you see anything, by the way, in the one that's showing, in the slide that's showing on classroom, from a classroom teacher's point of view, if you see anything that stands out that you'd like to comment on, please do so in the chat box. And while you're in the user guide, this slide is from page 14 in the user guide. Have a look at that page as well, and just see if there's anything that you note that's significant in this. What do you think is significant from the information on this page, and how STEP can be used? So Christine has pointed out that the descriptors, and we'll look at those in just a second in the next slide, can be used as next steps for teaching. I know there's quite a few pages there. It's hard to know if people have had a chance. I think I'm just going to move this along. So if you also, in the same guide, if you look on page, this slide is from page 20. This slide is from page 20. And just give us a green check if you've seen this before and you are using it, and give a red X if you have not seen this before. Just give us an idea of how we're doing with this step around the province. You can do it right into your Yeah, you can do it there, or you can do it in your chat. Okay, Jenny's brought up a really interesting point here about the use of STEP initially, but she's suggesting that in her experience, teachers aren't using STEP to monitor progress as they go specifically to the OLBs, so specific to the OLBs. Are people finding that as well? Give a thumbs up if you also find that. And I think part of what I'm trying to do here is suggest how important it is to use STEP and the many ways that we can make use of it. So that's kind of where we're going with this. I see there are some who have not seen STEP before, so I think the 5 boards, maybe I could just get an idea of this as I think we have everybody from the 5 boards online with us today. If anybody wants to take over the microphone and make a comment on that in terms of STEP in our boards. And certainly in Blue Water we are just introducing it this year, and it's sort of a 1 by 1 by 1 kind of basis. So we certainly have lots of teachers who are have seen it, but are probably, as Jenny said, not quite using it in the way that I hope they will once they get more comfortable with it. I don't know if somebody wants to speak from other boards. Please take the mic.
I'll just share what we're doing in Simcoe Muskoka. We've been using STEP essentially since it was shared with the province, which may be 4 or 5 years now. And teachers are still learning about it as they have ELLs, and we have limited numbers of ELLs, and teachers are learning how this resource can be a great asset to their tracking and their planning of programming for ELL.
I think, as Atala has said, that STEP is still very new for the majority of teachers, so hopefully this is a chance for you to have a really good look at it. The STEP continuum we're looking at, of course, in oral, in reading, and in writing. So there are 3 sets of continua to look at, and we're able to assess in those 3 strands of language as well by using them. Also, for ELD, there's an ELD continua. I'm not going to say very much about this right now because I know that Atala will take us into the English language learners with limited prior schooling in the next webinar. But the ELD STEP is a 4-step, it has 4 steps, and the ESL STEP has 6 steps. But they both have descriptors, and they're both graded, sort of clustered by grades. So grade 3 to 12 the ELDs are only grade 3 to 12, and the ESLs are clustered by grades.
Can I just say something, Ava?
Yes, please.
Just talking about STEP, I still feel that we still need a lot of work to do in building capacity across the panels for both elementary and secondary especially. It will be important to, I guess, to stress that this is a ministry-created resource. Sometimes teachers need the permission to use resources like these, especially in secondary. I'm finding out that as soon as you start talking about accommodations and modifications, they really get their wall up because their integrity of the course will be at stake. So it's important to I guess, to stress, that this is a ministry-created document, that it's okay to use it, and talk to administration about these documents so the teachers can feel more comfortable using it.
Very good point. Now, still in the user guide, I'm going to ask you to really go into it a little bit more deeply right now. So I've suggested some pages here to look at. I just want you to take time now to have a look. I'll turn the mic off for about 5 minutes or so you can look at these pages. Please add your thoughts into the chat box on how you feel these different sections can support you as you program and as you assess your ELLs. So just very quickly, in the top one, the samples of OLBs, those samples are in oral reading and writing, and they're grade clustered. And basically when you start, so if you have a student who starts in grade 4, once they come out of the grade 4, 5, 6, they'll move up onto the next grade cluster continuum, but continue where they are with their step at that point when they move on. The portfolios, gathering evidence and keeping in portfolios. Some boards, people may want to speak to this, but some boards are trying to keep portfolios electronically now that will move with them. I know that's the way we're moving towards this. Those portfolios will move from one grade to the next. There's a tracking document. I'll just speak to that briefly. And the reason why I have the policy document, that's the document with the yellow in its cover, the reason why I have that out there is because the tracking form that you'll look at is a sample, and there might be people from different boards who would like to speak to this as well. But we are mandated by policy, by ministry policy, to track the step, to track the progress in language, and put it into the OSR at the end of each year or at some point during the year. So there may be, that's an example. On page 23, it may not be the way it will look in all boards. On page 26 is a text alignment to step. It's also very useful for people who are trying to determine what kind of text and level of text would be useful in each of the different steps. And finally, and also it's incredibly useful, page 27 and 28, some strategies for each strand, and also some strategies clustered by step level. So have a look at those. I'm going to turn my mic off, and please comment on how you think these various things within this guide might help you as you program and assess your ELLs. Okay, I'm just going to come back in for a minute while you're reading those. Atala has asked if I could help people new to STEP understand how to determine a step for an ELL student. So if you look back at the step continuum, you can see there that what we basically do is ask people to highlight a descriptor once the teacher has consistently seen that behavior. And these are behaviors. They're called language behaviors. So once that behavior has been seen consistently, we feel, and you feel that in your professional judgment they have mastered that. That's when you highlight it. So it's showing a mastery of it rather than a developing towards it. You can also see on here, so that as the steps are highlighted, we also say that once a highlighted, and I think it speaks to this at the top here, in the top box, but once every descriptor has been highlighted in a step, we say that that step has been mastered. So you can see that you can have steps, you can have a scattered pattern of descriptors. And and you can have also a different step in oral, a different step in reading, and a different step in writing. I mean, they might not all be on step 3, for instance, in each of the 3 strands. So in this one, as it says here on the tracking form, the student would have consistently completed step 3 for oral, and they would be recorded as on step 3. Because step 4, even though they're developing towards that, they're working towards that, there are still a few descriptors that are not, that have not been seen. There's a few behaviors in language that have not been seen. So hopefully that answers Atala. Is there anything else that Atala would like to add? Also, Christine has made mention that the step uses the language of the curriculum, so it matches it, and that's very true. It was worked out with the curriculum, side by side with the curriculum. Okay, you probably haven't had a chance, to look at all of these areas, but I'm going to move us along, and now you know that things are there that you can go to when you need to. This is a broad look at STEP, and this was created thanks to Tony Stewart from Lambton, Kent, this slide. This is a broad look at STEP and learning objectives. So just to let you have a quick look at that. It kind of helps us cluster it and look at it fairly simply. You'll notice that in step 4, 5, and 6, Tony suggests that they may need accommodations in those grades, and the understanding there is that in step 1, 2, and 3, they will need accommodations and they may need modifications, and that's what we're going to in a minute. Lori has suggested, excellent, that it's good to share the OLBs with students. So you're working towards assessment as learning there, and also with parents so that they can begin to see the progress. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's kind of a nice in a nutshell. You're right. Okay, so differentiated instruction means adapting the instructional program. And what we mean by adapting the instructional program, as you can see by this chart, is modifications and accommodations. So we use the term adaptation to a program to indicate that modifications or accommodations have been made. So if you could, again, put your icon on here. How confident are you with making modifications to program, low to high? And how experienced do you feel, how much experience have you had in accommodating? Everything from none to sufficient experience in accommodating. And put yourself on there and we'll see how we're looking as a group. Okay, so you're assessing yourself and seeing where you are in that, and you maybe want to make some adjustments and think about where you've placed yourself on there. Of course, where we want to be is right up here in the right-hand corner, confident with modifications and sufficient accommodations are being put into place. But that's not where we always all are, not all the time. Okay, if I could ask you to go into the Chapter 3, Adapting which is about adapting the entire curriculum, and this is back into the supporting English language learners grade 1 to 3. Just have a really quick skim of this and see what would be useful for you in programming. And in the chat area, some quick examples of sections that you think you would find useful and you want to make use of. I think I need to say, I'm just going to show you the next slide briefly as well. In this document supporting ELLs grade 1 to 8, it needs a revision. It's talking about something called stages, which was the previous framework for assessment, and we have moved into steps. So this is just a quick comparison that I've made that might help you. So, for instance, stage 1 takes approximately 1.5 steps. Stage 2 takes us to about halfway through step 3. Stage 3 takes us to almost the end of step 4, and stage 4 is about a little bit of step 5 and step 4 and all of step 5 and 6. So it kind of gives you an idea of the change that was made. Our time is moving very fast, and I'm going to kind of move us along a little bit again. I know you can, you've had not a lot of time to skim on that, but if we can move along. On page 57 to 60 in the same document, have a quick look at some instructional strategies that are talked about there. And just think about it. If you have time, add onto this whiteboard some that you have found useful or that you think you would like to try. So the dual language dictionary is excellent for those beginning ELLs. Right, Atala, sorry, yes. Atala is asking for clarification between accommodations and modifications. Modifications are to the expectations in the curriculum, where you are reducing, and there is a slide coming up very quickly in a second that addresses that, where you're reducing or you're adapting the expectations to the curriculum. Accommodations are everything else that you do, but not touching the expectations. Check option for comprehension. This is an excellent one, and that means don't say do you understand, because that's a yes/no question, and it's a lot easier to save face and say yes I do. But you check in other ways. Individualize extensively with so many differences. It's really challenging. It is, and differentiation is a challenging part of our job. That's for sure. Good point, Nancy. I'm really sorry. I'm going to move us along again. Coming up very quickly, there are 3 slides from Newfoundland, which offer some great strategies as well. You can throw something in the chat box if you want to. I'm just going to put them up, have a quick look, and they're going to go 3, boom, boom, boom. Here we go. So these are accommodations now. I like the monitor teacher talk in this one. And finally, and possibly one that's quite stands out for us here is adapting assignments so that the ESL ELD writes less, has simply stated questions to answer, fewer spelling words or whatever it is in that. Okay, so that was, now very quickly as well, this is a differentiation from another source. These are sources outside of Ontario. Just have a quick look. I think it's Atella. Excellent. Oh no, excellent point. When you're modifying and when you're accommodating, look at the student's strengths. Support them with achievable goals. One realistic goal at a time. Nice point. Okay. Moving this along, sorry about the time. Getting to know students, excellent. Modifications, this is a comparison from Niagara District School Board and something that they put out with it for their teachers. So a quick look between the English language learner modifications and the special education modifications that you are all probably quite used to doing. Just let you have a look at that. And the top bit talks about secondary credit, remembering that it is the principal's discretion if there's significant changes in the number or the complexity of the learning expectations. And if those have been made, it's up to the principal and the teacher to determine if that course has been modified in such a way that it's acceptable and still maintains the integrity of the course. So just to make that point about policy, again, on adaptations for ELLs, and have a quick look at this. The expectation is that if the expectations have been modified, then the ESL or the ELD box must be checked on the report card. But when the program is adapted using only accommodations, the box is not checked. And a reminder that there is no IEP created for English language learners unless there is a special education identification as well. And again, at the very top, when learning expectations are modified, the evaluation for that subject will be based on the modified expectations. And different boards have different, certainly we all have the same expectations around this, but different boards have different ways of tracking that. Just let you have a little look at that. So the understanding that modifications may happen at the beginning, and but accommodations will probably happen much of the way through their 5 to 7 years or more of learning English. So modifications are reducing the number of expectations or simplifying or rewording or adapting the expectation to account for the ELL's culture, prior knowledge, and language proficiency. And everything else that you do to assist that child would be considered an accommodation. Now, we don't have time for this because we're running out of time, but page 65 in the same document that we've been looking at shows a template, and it's a really good place to look if you want to have and also page 67 and 69, a really good place to look if you want to see examples of modifying and accommodating for the student. I think we're just about out of time. My partner here tells me we are. So I really thank you for your participation. It went really fast. I'm sorry, but hopefully it's given you, really what I wanted to do was give you the opportunity to have a quick look at some documents that are going to be your best friend as you go through all of these things around assessment, modifications, accommodations, and those things that we call adaptations. So thank you very much.
I'm just going to say a quick thank you here to Avis and to Christina. You did exactly what you said just a minute ago. You've given us some amazing resources, and everyone had a chance to at least have a look at them. And now we can go back and take some time. But I think we had our eyes open to the value of these great resources from two experts. So thank you very much to both of you for doing that for us. I'm going to skip that slide. We don't need that one. And that's our final one. So I'm going to stop the recording right now, and then if any of you have any questions for our facilitators or for me, you can hang around for a few minutes. So thank you everyone for attending and for your active participation today.